Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being part. Today we'll review a great book that was done by a great man, Politics and Class Formation in Uganda. It's a book by Mahmood Mamdani, Professor Mahmood Mamdani, who happens to be the father to the recently elected mayor of New York City, Zoran Mamdani. It's a book that discusses Uganda's history and class formations from the pre-independence era all through until the time when Amin expelled the Asians from Uganda. It's a very interesting read that is going to teach you the history of Uganda and why we are where we are as a country. And to discuss this, I'm excited to have with me a great man that has done a lot of work, especially for a major publication in Uganda. He's a writer, he's a poet, he's a humorist, he's a comedian, he's many things, and he happens to be my friend. I'm talking about none other than Philip Matogo. So I hope you enjoy the discussions. He's going to lead me in this discussion, and he's going to dissect the book because he understands this better than I do. He's done so many reviews in the Daily Monitor that he works for, and I trust that he's going to do the book justice. So kindly tune in, and I hope you enjoy it. All right.
Good greetings, everybody. Wherever you are in the world, it's good to be in touch. I just opened up this book recently. It's called The Politics and Class Formation in Uganda. It's by Professor Mahmood Mamdani. Professor Mahmood Mamdani is a distinguished professor for anyone who cares about professorship and knowledge. He's a brilliant anthropologist and political scientist, and this book is his second book. Some say it's his first book, but it was written in 1976. I initially did a review of this book in the papers. That was like 3 years ago. It was a terrible review. So I'm here to make amends, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm ready to tell you something about the way I want us to discuss classes, because classes are pivotal in this day and age. In actual fact, we are in the midst of a class war, and yet we don't even know it, because the rich and the poor are at cross purposes. They've been so throughout time, but it's the gap between them now is bigger than ever. And what Mamdani's book does is to interrogate this gap and try to narrow it in the context of African politics. If you remember, during independence, there were three classes. There were the kulaks. These were the Buganda, let's call cultivators, and cultivators, and even they practice animal husbandry, but to a lesser degree. These are the guys who kulaks comes from the Russian Revolution, which means the rich peasants. Now, the rich peasants were from they believed in more of, consolidating Buganda's significance in the context of a new Uganda after independence. Now, because pre-independence, Buganda is an Asian kingdom. Anyway, then we had the traders. This was the second group, intermediary group, made up of there's the Indians, there's a commercial bourgeoisies. Altogether, these guys formed the petty bourgeoisies in Marxist theory, but I'll get to that later. Right, then we had the people who belonged to the state apparatus. Those were the colonialists. He influenced a lot of the theories on what Professor Mamdani thinks about how the economy should run. Now, basically, this book is about a Marxist, seeing Uganda's economy through a Marxist lens.
That's correct.
This is just basically that. Now, what is Marxism? Marxism is a system where the producers control the means of production, and they shape the production relations between what they call the product and the producer, the production relations. And what we produce, whether it's crops, whether it's a new iPhone, all those things reflect the labor, the value of labor. Now, what happens in capitalism is this, according to Marx. The worker or the producer, which is you and me, what he does or what she does is, say you put out a product. Now, the capitalists will pay you for that product and then, aggrandize themselves. The idea is this is what Karl Marx says. There's a theory of surplus value. That is the work you put in and the value you give and the money you get for the value you give. Now, the difference between there is what is taken by the capitalist, appropriated, that's the word Karl Marx uses, and also Mamdani likes to use, appropriated by the capitalist and used to subjugate and subordinate the working class. What Marx said is the working class should take control of their destiny and rise up. And this is what I think Mamdani's son is doing in New York. He's telling the average New Yorker, average American, to rise up against the oligarchs. The oligarchs are the rich class. And this is what this book is really about. It's not a call to arms, it's just a call to thinking, in the sense that once you analyze empiricism in the context of Uganda's history and rationalism, as we see in Kant's book. I'm also reading this book, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm not really reading it upside down, but I'm reading it. Now, when you look at rationalism, which is, how the mind conducts itself in a more orderly fashion, if I could put it in my words, then empiricism, looking at experience, looking at examples, looking at concrete lived experiences. Then there's what he talked about, transcendental idealism. Transcendental idealism means that is a variant of rationalism and empiricism. It transcends, it goes beyond the two in order to create a new reality. What Mamdani's book is doing here for us is analyzing the context in which Uganda can actually improve its lot. I made some comments on how classes are formed based on this, because Karl Marx, the central thing of Karl Marx's thinking is class struggle. That is the central thinking of Marxian thinking. Class struggle. Rich, poor. It's a battle of bread. That's what he called it. Hegel, there was a philosopher who came before him. He said that the battle in society is a battle of ideas. Karl Marx dismissed that and said, no, the battle between men, human beings, is a battle of bread. Who gets what and for how long? That's the question. So now, in the process of who gets what and how long, and our relation to the production process, classes are formed. Let me give you a breakdown of what Professor says in this book. This is one of my best quotes in the book. While classes form at the level of production in their relation to the process of production, they act at the level of politics. Class organization is political organization. Class consciousness is political consciousness. And class conflict is political conflict. You see? It's no longer about just economics and bread and butter. It's about life itself. Because classes usually reflect who you are. Which class are you in? Where do you belong? Or where do you what you identify yourself as? That is what shapes your political outlook. That's why you see right now, even in New York, you saw the average man going against the oligarch, because their consciousness and their organization is based on their material wealth. And that's what shapes their consciousness. That's what Karl Marx is saying. You must interpret history through an economic lens. Nothing else. You look at people's material wealth, then from the material wealth, you generate the ideas. Because at the end of the day, Karl Marx he believed in communism. One could argue because he was poor. Karl Marx was not a wealthy man. He lived a very indigent life, as I would say. He was not a rich man. And fun fact, he also wrote his books Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto when he was drunk. True story. So that's why many of the theories in his books kind of a bit convoluted and contradictory in many areas. That's why Professor Mamdani's book, this Politics and Class Formation in Uganda, was a very hard read to Ugandans, because it kind of goes in, in that Marxian fashion where you contradict yourself, you interrogate yourself, you say one thing, then you imply another. This is the kind of book. It's almost like a rabbit hole of intellectual growth, essential rabbit hole. Okay, now that's beautiful. Now, in what he talked about, the kulaks, I told you the kulaks, the traders, which were the Indians, and the ruling class, the state apparatus, the bureaucrats, the urban bureaucrats. Now, this is what's happening in Uganda. When we got independence, what happens is the black people replace the bureaucrats on top. That's why you found Obote, Museveni, everybody goes on top. They replace the white people, and then the Indians stay in the middle, because the Indians were always the middlemen between the indigenous Ugandan and the leader. So in a way, in a way you would say that they're like representatives.
The middlemen.
Yeah, the middlemen for the ruling class. Okay?
That Mamdani called
the petty bourgeois.
Was it the petty bourgeois?
Yeah. Now you see, in Marxist theory, the petty bourgeois are all these guys who deal in more of low-scale production, subsistence, and that's what we had in the Ugandan pre-colonial context. We used to produce to eat. Not necessarily to produce to trade. Trade came in later, as Mamdani pointed out, with cotton, coffee, and those goods which can actually be the cash crops. Before, it was always a system where we would subsist on what we produce. But sorry, let me be very clear in this one, because I think I'm going in circles. I'm going to be very clear. Now, Mamdani was talking about, if you look at the three classes, this is a fact. This is how neo-colonialism comes around. This is what he understands. This is what he interrogates. When the British left Uganda, they left a collaborating class. The collaborating class were Obote and his cohorts, including Mutesa, because Mutesa went to Cambridge. And Obote, if you see his career, he rose as in 1956, 57. He went to Parliament based on the fact that the British elevated him. So he was also a product of British power. So these guys took over, and the British were comfortable that these guys would continue to propagate colonial rule. But then somewhere along the line, things went wrong. The classes clashed. To explain it properly, as Mamdani says, the kulaks and the ruling class ended up clashing. They did also in colonial times. 1952, the Kabaka was deported. I think you remember, 1953 rather, the Kabaka crisis. Before that, the British always had problems with the Kabakas, except for maybe Daudi Chua, who was an infant when he came in and died at the age of 39. So the point is, the British always were hard-pressed to control the kulaks. So when Obote came in contact with the kulaks, there was an inevitable clash, because with them, they believed in their traditional way of doing it, traditional modes of production and their wealth creation. They had already controlled, Buganda controlled much of the wealth in the country. Obote wanted to correct this and spread it around a lot as a typical nationalist. But in the process of doing this, there was a clash. And this clash resolved itself in the form of a class struggle. A class struggle, the ruling class versus the kulaks, which means rich peasant in Russia during the Russian Revolution. If you remember during the Russian Revolution, and if you remember during George Orwell's book, Animal Farm, do you remember the chickens that started destroying all their eggs? Do you remember those chickens in the Animal Farm? Those were the kulaks. In the Russian context, those were the richer peasants. In Uganda, of course, Buganda was richer peasants. So Obote had to break this. Now, what Professor Mulindwa said is that Obote brought about move to the left. A move to the left was a more socialist way of redistribution of resources. Move to the left, and Professor Mulindwa says he brought this about because he was saying, Baganda, move to the left while your wealth moves to the right. You know, it was basically a trick to take the Kulak's wealth. And this is the essence of class struggle. And it is continued today because the collaborating class is now the Musevenis, President Museveni and his ilk. And the rest of us, the Indians, are still there. If you read this book called Uganda, an Indian colony, you realize that the Indians control more than 60%, about 70% of the economy. And they do this on behalf of the ruling class. Just like in colonial times, the Indians were controlling the wealth on behalf of the British to keeping the natives in line. This is what is happening now. That's why you should not be shocked that there's so many rich foreigners and so many poor indigenous people. Thank you. Okay, I would not even use the word constrained. I would say they scrambled, because indeed there were classes before, there were pre-colonial classes, but the classes were based mainly on status, not economic wealth. You see, there's a bit of a difference, because you can see you had the ruling class. Say in Uganda, you had the ruling class. And they didn't have to be the richest, but sure, they had access to the means of production, no doubt. The land was theirs, it belonged to the Kabaka. And land is a factor of production and also therefore a means of production. So what we could say is that they were not really constrained. I would say that they were scrambled. Look at it this way. When the British came, they created a collaborating class first in Buganda. They kept the Kabaka ship because it was a symbol of Buganda's heritage. So they kept the Kabaka ship, because Kabaka means emissary. That's what it means, representative. That's what it means, from God, divine representative. Now, they kept that because they knew they couldn't touch that. But they did indeed touch it in the sense that they got rid of, remember they got rid of Kabaka Mwanga and then put his son there, Daudi Chua, who was an infant. In the process, they also got rid of the landowners, the Bataka, the people who owned the land. They got rid of those guys and replaced them with a collaborating group, the Apollo Kagwas. This became the new aristocracy. You see how they played with the game. Now, when they did that, this you could say this became a travesty in the sense that, the Bataka had to rise in 1945, 1949. There was the Bataka uprising because they wanted their rights back, their cultural rights. They wanted their lands. They wanted their burial sites. They wanted everything back to normal. So the British crushed that. To this day, we have, because of the classes which are artificially formed, even in Uganda today, because creating a middle class, like through foreigners and Indians, is very dangerous, because at the end of the day, I know the ruling class believes that foreigners will not have the political clout, because Sudhir cannot run for mayor or president. All due respect, he's an Indian. And Ugandans have that kind of, they'll be like, no, this is our own. We've seen Indians, yes, win in different, Sinkantongale, we've seen different people win in different areas, but on the whole, there's no way at the very apex of politics that they would have a foreigner. So no one threatens the president's position if he's foreign. You see what I mean? They cannot be president. But an indigenous person like me can be president. So if I'm allowed to be economically empowered to a degree where I can challenge the status quo, that becomes dangerous. That's why they need to maintain these artificially created classes in order to keep us down. Because we're a threat. Ugandans, the average Ugandan is a threat. We've seen people like Dr. Chigundu, Suleiman Chigundu, who had Greenland Bank and he expanded it across East Africa. We've seen them dismember that. We've seen them all. Indeed, how come Sembule? How many indigenous companies do you know? You know, like really indigenous. Most of the going concerns in Uganda today are foreign, or they're dominated by the state. And that is by design, it's not by accident. The truth is, the class formations are based on domination. That's what he's trying to talk about. That's what Mamdani is saying. And this domination is the supremacy of one class over the other. Marx said this: there must be a new kind of rulership, dictatorship, if you will, of the working class above all other classes, because it's the working class which produces wealth. They're the producers. So they are worthy of their hire. These are his words. Their surplus value should not be used to aggrandize and enrich the rich. It should be used to pay for health care, pay for education, pay for, a simple livelihood, how you take care of your family. These basic things. Actually, socialism has been so demonized by the rich that even the poor person doesn't realize that the best things that we have in this society are of a socialist bent. Look at it: National Social Security, NSSF. NSSF is a socialist, is socialist in the sense that it's providing social security. It's providing a safety net for people. What rich people say is, no, work for your stuff and you get paid accordingly. That's what they're saying. They're just saying that, and what if you don't have access? You don't have opportunity. They use the word tough shit. Excuse my French, but that's the truth. So what socialism says is to each according to their need and to all according to their ability. So it's not leveling. Karl Marx and even Mamdani go out of their way to explain this. Communism, socialism is not leveling. Leveling is putting everyone at the same level, regardless of ability, regardless of need, regardless of input or output. Everybody is the same. No, socialism presupposes that we're different. But in our differences, we must all be accorded the kind of respect in terms of our relationship to the factors of production or the production process. It's a case of dignity, really, because wealth and labor, especially honest labor, is a form of dignity. It brings dignity to the person who delivers it, and it also brings dignity to a society which is not being bedraggled by war, stuff like that, which is the opposite of honest work.
I know you would want, you would better describe that using equity and equality.
Hey, equity and equality, okay.
I would think.
Yeah, okay, let me say equality. Yeah? Let me say equality is more of a myth because we're not the same. None of us are the same. And we should not demonize.
I hope I haven't lost you. I meant in the context of socialism.
I'm going to do that. You see, the thing is this. Okay, let us look at these notions of equality and equity. Equality in terms of capitalism, ideally, because, by the way, Karl Marx is the one who coined the word capitalism. Yeah, interesting. Now, in the context of capitalism, equality would mean that I have equal opportunity, equal access to resources. That's what it would mean. But then again, we have the phenomenon of the robber barons. It started with them. And the monopolists, they control the economy. They're not going to give you equal access or equality to such access. They're not. Because equality would negate their wealth. And they want a bigger share as opposed to your smaller share. Their idea is to maximize profits while minimizing costs. Do you think that includes making you richer? No, it doesn't. So equality in the context of capitalism really means, ideally means access to opportunity, equal opportunity, because we're all different. Now, equity is what we're looking for. More something which is the wealth is distributed according to your contribution. What you give, everybody's got equal opportunity to contribute, everybody. And then we let the playing field take care of itself. Nobody determines what the playing field should look like or how it should interact with the players. That's the beauty of equity. Now, when we look at Uganda, is there equity? Mamdani says no. Is there equality? possibly of poverty. But that's another case. That's another question altogether. Because we spend a lot of money to stay poor, incidentally. That's the irony. Go ahead, please. Do you know the expulsion actually started in 1968 under Obote? If you go and see Uganda, an Indian colony, you read that book. It didn't start with Idi Amin. There was a process. You know, this was based on a lot of rationality. Many people make it look like Idi Amin just woke up and decided. But this was something which had been discussed and had already been put into policy years before he even came to power. However, Idi Amin, what he did is, I think he just quickened the pace because people were already leaving. He said, you're out of here in a few days. That was different. That was dramatic. He kind of like pulled off the band-aid, and that caused a lot of trouble. You could not, in any economy, you see, economies are based on confidence. Producers must know that what they produce has a market, and, you know, it goes for a price which is beneficial to themselves. And on top of that, they must know that there's security so they can go on producing. So that's confidence, right? A consumer is also based on confidence. A consumer will be confident that, hey, if they go to the shop, they'll be able to buy the product they want at the cost, at the price they wish to have, with the variety available. This is all confidence. But once that confidence is taken away, where suddenly you go to the shop and you find nothing, that's what happens to the economy. Once the consumer believes that there's no hope and the producer provides a hopeless situation by not being able to even produce because the consumer has no money to buy. This is the situation what happened when the Indians left. There was a breakdown. They gave the Indian companies to many Africans, but that was really like giving a baby, you know, live ammunition, you know, like asking Rambo to be Rambo at the age of 3. Let's say that. You know, he was not called, it was just a baby, just a kid, just a toddler. So this is what our economy was. I mean, this is what our tycoons were. There was no way we could adapt to a trader role. Because remember, as we pointed out early on, Ugandan classes were divided into 3. We had the bureaucrats on top, state apparatus. In fact, Mamdani called just to give it right, he said the bureaucrats within the state apparatus. Well, I use the same words, I guess. But anyway, the point is this. There were those classes. There was the bureaucrats, then there were the kulaks, who were the traders, those Indians mainly, and then finally not the kulaks, sorry, there were the petty bourgeois in between, the traders. Then at the bottom were the kulaks, those are the Baganda mainly. Now, imagine a situation where you remove the middle class. What happens then? You see, you remove that class. Another form, because nature abhors a vacuum. So another class will form. And that was the Magendo class. If you remember, the Magendo class. Get rich quick. That filled the vacuum because the system collapsed. There were no regulations. Everything went. And you saw what President Amin was doing at the time. He was trading in petty items, luxury items in England towards the end of his regime. I think it was Salford Airport. It was a big scandal. You know, selling a few things like coffee for whiskey and stuff like that. This was the later Amin years. So if you look at what happened, they garbled the whole system. So in the end, the first became last, the last became first, and there was chaos everywhere. The class systems, new classes were formed. The kulaks became now, you could say, the people who were untrained, untested, the ones that gave the properties of the Indians, Nasa Sebagala and the rest. These became the new kulaks, the richer peasants. Then on top, of course, the ruling class maintained, was there. However, because of scrambling up the classes and creating a socialist dispensation during the Cold War, Obote drew a target on his own back because now the British couldn't take that, the Israelis couldn't take that. The collaborators of the West could not take that. So he was overthrown in 1971. And that was a direct consequence of, that's how the class struggle resolved itself. because there were three, you see? And this is how it resolved itself. Idi Amin, who belonged to the ruling class, allied with certain elements of the other classes, and they overthrew Obote. Yeah, because that was it. Because if you remember, they even brought back the Kabaka's body. So he allied with other classes, the kulaks, to defeat Obote. Then he replaced the traders with his own collaborators. Because you see, leadership is about creating a majority. That's what it is. Obote created a composed majority. Let me give you a quick breakdown. 1964. 1961, we had Kabaka Yeka, which means King Only, and the Uganda People's Congress. They came together to bring together Central and other tribes which supported nationalist ideology or orthodoxy. This was a composed majority. Then it came to pieces in 1964. So Obote allied with the military class, not the military class, but with the army, to buttress his own rule. In that alliance, they went against the kulaks, because the kulaks were actually the backbone of the economy. And when that resolved itself in his overthrow, Idi Amin replaced the Indian class with his own collaborators in order to compose his own majority. So politics is all about creating majorities. Even for dictators, everybody needs a majority, at least in the sense that, you know, you can actually hold your own. I would say Zoran is not a Marxist. He's not. He's what they call a democratic socialist. Yeah, if we're to look at his inclination, he's a democratic socialist. So obviously there's, people tend to conflate Marxism and socialism. They think they're the same things. They are different. Of course, they look for more equitability in the distribution of resources. But apart from that, they're quite different, because Marxism implies a workers' revolution. Socialism implies more humanism, because we're socialists. We had a communal setup in pre-colonial Africa. You look at the way our modes of production were communal. So that's more of socialist. And in fact, one could argue, in fact, the independence leaders argued that we are more attuned to socialism. And this era right now in America, where people are becoming more sensitized, they've come to realize that socialism is not the enemy. And that's what has helped Zoran. Zoran is the little man's champion, because the little man is getting an unfair deal from all these oligarchs around the world. Money seems to be the way. Might implies right. But Zoran has shown that right implies right. And that does not make him a Marxist. People of the right or of the Republican class, or people who disagree with him, tend to label him that. But even if he was a Marxist, would that be a bad thing? I don't think so. And what is Marxism anyway? In relation to what he said. What is anything that he said is Marxism? He said, well, okay, we'll have immigrants. How's a Marxist? You know, this is a nation of immigrants. America is a nation of immigrants. The only indigenous people there, they're natives, native Indians. Some people even said, oh, black people there before the Indians. But that's another argument I don't want to go into right now. So Zoran is not a Marxist. I would say that Zoran is pro-people. In actual fact, if we're to really estimate him well, he's a humanist, which is similar to Marx, because, okay, let's look at it this way. The Republicans assume big government is bad. Big government is socialist, right? That's what they assume. Now, and they assume that that's what the stance is of every Democrat. They want big government, in the form of the welfare state, providing welfare, providing certain amenities, and not luxuries, but amenities, which would help the average person. So they say that expands the size of the state. So their argument is, let's cut it down, and therefore we won't have, and therefore reduce the taxes, because when you have a bigger state, you need bigger taxes in order to keep it afloat. So they say, let's pare it down, reduce it, to almost the sum of its parts. Once it's reduced, you reduce the taxes, and this stimulates production in the sense that the taxes are reduced, so everyone is incentivized to work more. Why? Because they're like, hey, I can get to keep most of my wealth. It doesn't get lost in taxes. That is what the Republicans argue, at least the older Republicans. Zoran is arguing for, he's not arguing for a bigger state. He's arguing for a more active state. But here's the fun fact. Karl Marx was against us. He doesn't even mention the state much in Marxism. It's about production and production relations. It's not about the state. In fact, Karl Marx says that the end of communism, the end of first capitalism will reach its acme. It will reach a position where it can no longer hold. After it comes apart at the seams, that's when communism will come. Now, the end of communism implies that there is no state. Mankind will be stateless. We'll run free, we'll be free, and we'll govern ourselves. This is his argument. We'll take care of our own resources as human beings, almost like heaven. I haven't been to heaven, but almost like that. You have your own resources, you take care of them as an individual, take care of your family, render unto Caesar in the sense that you don't disturb your neighbors, and that's it. There's no state. What Zoran is doing by demanding for a more active state, he's going to expand the state. Yeah, he'll have to, because they will need new agencies to carry out the things which have not been done for the people, which he claims. So that even if it's marginal, there will be an expansion of the state. And that would imply a possibility of more taxes. It's possible. But people may support him based on the fact that they know that he has not only an evangelical standpoint in the sense that he's ready to change things in a very messianic way. He's in the sense that they actually trust him. He looks like a genuine person. And that's one thing I liked about Professor Mamdani. He is a genuine critic of, a genuine analyst, of politics in Uganda. His new book, Slow Bleed, kind of turns that on its head in the sense that he's now supporting Idi Amin. He's saying that President Museveni is worse than Idi Amin. That's also another question of argument. Maybe he's also a victim to the polarization that his son Zoran is facing. Who knows? Because you could be now polarized towards rejecting everything that Museveni offers. I don't think, if we are to be honest, after looking at his critique and how classes are formed in Uganda, it is attributing too much to Museveni as a person to say that, he had the agency to totally dismember or destroy Uganda. That's my thinking. It's too much. According to what he says, there are social forces beyond Museveni, beyond Bobby Wine, beyond Zoran, and beyond Mamdani himself. And these helped form classes and politics. We talked about class organization reflective of economic organization. We talked about all those things. These are his quotes. So Museveni is actually a product of his times, not a reflection of it. It's been great talking to you guys. For more book reviews, subscribe to G Styles. You get the best. We're going to carry out many more soon. Less complicated, but just as good. Thanks.
All right, and now that brings us to the end of this particular review. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two. For those that haven't yet subscribed, kindly hit that subscribe button. And for those that are watching a video on this channel for the first time, please note that we have a lot of material in store for you. We do adventure trips, interviews, didactic talks, and so much more. All right, so subscribe so you don't miss a thing whenever we share. All right, thank you for watching once again, and see you on the next one. Cha-ching.